Edifice of Trust podcast is a thoughtful discussion of today's current events from the perspective of America's founding principles. Hello and welcome. I call this episode of the Edifice of Trust podcast The Difference Between Disloyalty and Treason. I think we all know the difference between disloyalty and treason. A person can be disloyal to another person, like a boss or spouse or family member, to a cause or to an organization or institution, or to a country. Treason is when you're disloyal to your country. The U.S. Constitution states that treason, quote, shall consist only in levying war against them, meaning the states, or in adhering to their enemies, giving them aid and comfort. So the writer of the anonymous op-ed in the New York Times recently has been disloyal to his boss, the president, and his administration, but is not a traitor. Bradley, now Chelsea Manning, disclosed confidential government information to the public, including our enemies, and is therefore a traitor, even though President Obama pardoned him or her. But the use of the word treason in capital letters in a recent tweet is interesting because it gives us more insight into the writer of the tweet than it does about the supposed crime committed. In my experience, most populist leaders have narcissistic tendencies. Napoleon, Adolf Hitler, Benito Mussolini, and Juan Perón were highly narcissistic, and this is not very surprising. Most leaders are somewhat narcissistic, and some exhibit grandiose narcissism, which is exemplified by flamboyance, assertiveness, and dominance. They also have an inflated sense of self, are overconfident in making decisions, and don't learn from mistakes. A little bit of narcissism can actually help leaders be confident, outgoing, and persuasive, but an excess can lead to the abuse of power and unethical behavior. Our current president exhibits many of these narcissistic behaviors, but that does not necessarily disqualify him as a leader. Lyndon Johnson and Franklin Roosevelt also exhibited many of these traits, according to a 2013 study in Psychological Science magazine. But while many great leaders have been narcissists, their narcissistic tendencies can lead them astray. They discount the opinions of others, except when those others agree with the leader and believe that said leader is a genius. And since fairness is highly subjective, as I have pointed out numerous times before, any actions that do not benefit the narcissist or violate that person's sense of fairness are judged grossly unfair and prejudicial. But the principal trait that is of concern for citizens is that the narcissistic leader tends to conflate his or her own persona with the will of the people. The leader believes that what he or she believes, the people also believe, and that what he or she desires, the people also desire. This causes the narcissistic leader to emasculate or destroy civic institutions that have the potential to oppose his or her policies. Supreme Courts are packed with cronies, as President Roosevelt attempted and Hugo Chavez succeeded in doing. Legislative powers are diminished, Hugo Chavez again, but also President Obama. And constitutions are altered to guarantee continuance in power. For example, Xi Jinping, Hugo Chavez, Evo Morales, Mugabe, Hitler, Mussolini, the list goes on and on. In many countries, this conflation devolves into massive corruption as state revenues are viewed as the same as personal income. For example, Hugo Chavez's family is said to have amassed a $4 billion fortune, while the average Venezuelan citizen has lost 26 pounds due to food shortages. For this reason, the narcissistic leader views personal disloyalty as treason, because the leader's persona and the state are intertwined. This is why, a week after his inauguration, President Trump asked then FBI Director James Comey to pledge his loyalty, and why he expects all his White House staff to do the same. This is why opposition to a narcissistic leader is treason. He conflates his persona with the government and views the anonymous op-ed as an attack not only on himself, but on the country. This is why we must endure the presidency of Donald Trump, but not fall into the cult of personality promoted by many populist leaders. Irrational support and opposition has set the stage for violent confrontation. We must reject the populist policies of both the right and the left. Where is the voice of reason? All I can say is, thank goodness that it's so difficult to amend the Constitution. Don't forget my most recent publication, 2017, A Trumpian Year in Review, is now available at various book outlets, including Amazon, Barnes & Nobles, in either paperback or ebook format, also available at Apple as an iBook. It's joined by my other books, Principled Policy, A Conversation About America, Edifice of Trust, Toward a Principled Social Policy, and also my novel, Tawantinsuyu, a novel about nuclear terror. And don't forget my fascinating and exciting summation of the principles of taxation. For more information and links to the book outlets, please check out my website, www.edificeoftrust.com. Thanks. Welcome back. Everyone knows that Donald Trump is a narcissist. He is probably the most pathologically narcissistic person I have ever encountered. But narcissism is a personality disorder, not a mental illness. There is no biological explanation for narcissism and no known therapy or cure. Since there is no cure or treatment for narcissism, all we can do when we encounter narcissists is to avoid them. They don't make very good friends or lovers. If you have a narcissistic boss, you can either change jobs or you have to suffer the abuse of a narcissistic boss. I would not be surprised if many men accused of the #MeToo movement are narcissists as well. And when a narcissist is president, he or she must be endured. The 25th Amendment does not apply. That does not mean there is no cause for concern. Narcissistic leaders seem drawn to populism like moths to a flame. The cult of personality associated with such regimes feeds their egos. The pomp and circumstance gratifies their sense of importance and self-esteem, and such leaders do not like to give up all those perks of leadership and are insulted by any opposition to their policies or their behavior. So these leaders try to destroy the democratic and social institutions that could oppose them and try to maintain their control of leadership for their lifetime. The progressive left opposes everything that President Trump proposes, but he is just doing his job. He is supposed to be proposing policies. Many of our democratic institutions are in need of reform. Draining the swamp is more than a campaign slogan. But we must be on guard that reform does not slide into destruction. His war with the mainstream media frequently veers into classically narcissistic diatribes. But the media has left itself open to criticism by its leftward drift and sometimes openly partisan bias. Preserving our democratic institutions does not mean adopting the Marxist-based beliefs of the progressive left. It means sticking to the Enlightenment principles of America's founding. Thank you for listening. Thanks for listening to my podcast. If you would like to hear more Edifice of Trust podcasts, please don't forget to subscribe. Thank you.